This
Please raise
conference
your
will
hand
now
and
be recorded.
I will come back to that and address the same thing out here. So yes, any questions, guys? Anyone? Any questions, online or offline, that I can take before we can get started? Anyone? Any questions? Any challenges that you're facing? Anything? Any questions till here? Anyone? Anything till here? So we were looking at concepts like Azure Tenant. Then we said what is Azure subscription. Then we said why do you need let's say multiple subscriptions under the same tenant. These are a couple of things we were discussing out here. So again, Azure Tenant is something that you just go ahead and just register an email ID with Azure, and once you go through that verification procedure telling what is your code and all that stuff, once you do that, you get something called as a tenant ID. Again, if I want to look at my tenant ID, I just go into portal.azure.com. I just go into, let's say, portal.azure.com out here, and once I am into portal.azure.com, let me re-navigate into this particular page. There's something called Azure Active Directory. Either you see this particular icon, or you can just go here and say Azure Active Directory out here. Anything is super good. Once you go here, uh, in here there is something known as a tenant ID that gets reflected. Again, the tenant ID is something that I do not create. This is something that Microsoft assigns to you while you create an account with them. This is purely for Microsoft to identify using this particular ID that what is your space, what is, let's say, your space on the cloud that they offer out here. After the tenant ID, we will have to create something called as a subscription. In order to use the cloud, we need to create something called as a subscription out here. Again, the process of creation of a subscription, again, if you just go to the home page and just look for something called subscriptions, you come into something called subscription right now. And once you come inside subscriptions, by default, you will not see anything. It says there are no subscriptions to show and etc. You'll need to click on add, select the offer called free trial, fill in details like your name, your email address, your phone number, and go ahead and, let's say, verify yourself with something called as a credit card information out here. And once you fill up those informations and click on sign up, you will see something called as a subscription with something known as the subscription ID that is associated with the same. So subscription ID again is a unique, let's say, string. Your subscription ID and my subscription ID. If you have two different subscription IDs, both the IDs are different. Both the IDs will be different. And again, we also did discuss about the concept on what a free trial subscription really is, wherein it's free for the first 30 days. You'll get 14,000 as, let's say, credits, and it will expire, let's say, after the 30 days. It's not auto renewed. Is something that we discussed. After that, we talked about how a company goes for something called as a pay as you go subscription, and depending upon the support model that you choose for, the support option that you kind of choose for, your billing is varied accordingly. Again, there is a developer support, a standard support, a professional direct, starting from 2,400 rupees. Then you have 8,000. Then you have 80,000 rupees out here. Depends upon what kind of a support you choose. Again, if you don't choose any support, Microsoft will give you a basic support option out here, which will give you, let's say, as the name indicates, a very basic support, like a very general guidance and all these things out, not very technical in nature, and you do not have to really pay anything for them for that. That those are the three support models out here. And I also said that you could have multiple subscriptions under the same tenant. And the reason being, we were talking about an example called Tata Motors and Tata Steel and Tata Finance, three different companies under the same parent called Tata. And we said, why is it really important to go for, let's say, multiple subscriptions, and why do generally companies go for multiple subscription out here, and so on and so forth. Again, under each and every subscription that you have, let's say in our case, I just have one simple subscription here. In our case, I just have one simple subscription, one single subscription here. And under each and every subscription, you can start adding multiple users. Meaning, let's say you have a company, and in that company, you will have multiple teams. You'll have different teams like development teams, QA teams, HRs, DevOps engineers, a lot of things out here. Each and every subscription can support n number of users. There is no real number. You can have n number of users working parallelly, logging in parallelly with different IDs under the same tenant, and can go ahead and start using all these or can go ahead and, let's say, start using the resources under this particular subscriptions. So now I'm telling you can have a tenant. Under a tenant, you can have multiple subscriptions. Under a subscription, you can now have start having multiple users out here who can parallelly go ahead and log into your subscriptions. Meaning, let's imagine very simple example again. Tata Motors. Just a second, guys. Guys, can you please go on mute if you do not have a question? It is disturbing the other people in the class out here. Okay, let me mute you out and let me come back. Yes. So I have a parent called Tata, under which there is someone called Tata Motors. Imagine Tata Motors now is moving to the cloud. Tata is saying, okay, fine, you know what, all my data, all my applications. For example, you see the website when you go to Tata Motors, you see all the cars and everything. Let's say that website is hosted on the cloud. Let's say in order to maintain that website, you need a team. You need a team of developers, you need a team of QAs, you need a team of, a lot of people out here. So now all that team needs to have access to different resources that are running in the background, like databases, like customer records and all these things out. All these records, all these databases are hosted, let's say, in the Azure cloud in one of the subscriptions. Now I as Tata Motors would want to add all my employees under this particular subscription. I want to take all my employees, add them under this particular subscription out here. Can I do it? Can I do it? Yes, definitely I can do it. One subscription, as I said, will support multiple users. And mark my point, whoever needs access to your Azure portal, needs access to the Azure portal, need to be a part of your Active Directory. This is what I'm really coming down to, is what do I mean by an Active Directory out here. Again, just a very, let's say, layman comparison out here is that, let's say you're a user who's just using a laptop and using a Google Chrome browser out here. Okay, so you're a user, you're just using a Google Chrome browser in order to, let's say, sign into a website or going into a website called facebook.com. I'm sure a lot of people might have gone to facebook.com and so on and so forth. Say Facebook. And what is the first thing that you see here when you go to facebook.com? What's the first thing that you see when you go to this particular website? Homepage telling user ID, login, password, and all these things. So you give a login, you give a password. What does Facebook do? Is that in the background, Facebook maintains a database. I would say a database of users along with their IDs and passwords. So let's say you're a user called A who's logging into this website, and this password is maintained somewhere like this in a hashed format. So a user called A at the rate gmail.com, you're logging into facebook.com out here. And what does Facebook do? Very firstly is checks whether the ID exists or not. Whether this ID exists in the backend database or not. Says, okay, fine, the ID exists, great. Then let me check the password. the password that is stored under this particular ID or against this particular ID, is it right or wrong? If it's right, then the backend database will communicate back to this particular application called facebook.com. Facebook.com will communicate back to your browser. Your browser in return will give you a page wherein you will be able to see your account and all the friends and all that stuff in your account and all these things out here. This is how traditionally a website normally works. Now let's turn this a little bit around. Same thing. I'm now telling instead of facebook.com, let's put this as portal.azure.com. So instead of Facebook, I'm putting it portal.azure.com. And again, whenever I go ahead and say portal.azure.com out here, very first thing that I see is what? A sign in page. It's telling either you sign in with the existing ID, or if you don't have one, go ahead and create one, or you can get one new one and all that stuff. So let's say I give some random ID. I'm giving some random ID out here. The first thing it verified is what? Whether the ID is existing or not. And where is it verifying? In the background, it's verifying this particular ID existing or not inside something called as the Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory out here. So it's going inside the Azure Active Directory and it's checking whether this particular ID is existing or not. If it's existing, under which directory ID this is existing really? You know, where is this really existing? Which directory ID am I, let's say, really looking at and all that stuff? So again, if I just go back and say my ID, which is classes azuredevops at gmail.com, and say enter. Now, if you see in the top, it's telling some ID and all that stuff. So it's telling, okay, fine, the user is there in the background. There is some ID basically that the user is, let's say, trying to, let's say, sign in. And now it will go into my particular tenant. And inside my tenant, if I go into my tenant out here, so I'm trying to sign in inside my tenant, there is in the left hand corner. Now, all these that you see here, overview, preview features, and etc. We call them as blades in Azure. Normally, you call it as options in any website, but in a very technical term, we call them as blade, BLADES, blades in Azure out here. There is one blade out here called users. If you go into users, I as a user called classes Azure DevOps, I am registered with this particular Active Directory. My account is registered with this Active Directory. Only because I'm registered, I'm able to go ahead and sign in here. So it's telling, okay, fine, the user exists. Now give the password of that particular user. And once the password is right. So for example, if I just give a incorrect password or something like this, checking, it's telling, okay, fine, you have an incorrect password. So the Active Directory, what I store the password in the background, it's not the same. Please go ahead, reset your password or give the correct password. Only then I'll be able to allow you to sign in and etc. Which means all the users, that's why I was telling this statement, is that whoever needs access to your Azure portal, whichever user needs access to your Azure portal, whoever wants to log into your Azure portal needs to be a part of your Active Directory. Meaning, let's say I have created a subscription. Again, same example. Tata has created this particular subscription. There are three users out here called user 1, user 2, and user 3. And user 3 out here. Now, these three users need to be a part of your subscription out here. So, I'll just go here into something called Azure Active Directory. This is the place where all the users needs to be added. And if I go into users, there is no user 1, no user 2, no user 3 out here. So let's go ahead, add them. So in order to add them, there is a button here called what? New user, and click on create a new user. And now it's telling create or invite. We'll also talk about what is invitation. We'll look at that. We'll just scroll down. It's telling, okay, fine. What is the name of the user? I'll say it is user one. Again, it's telling user one at the rate on Microsoft.com and so on and so forth. This is my primary domain. As I was explaining yesterday, if you look at a company, instead of this entire domain, they'll have something like @tata.com. They'll have their own domain. They'll place this out. So this will become user one @tata.com in our example. So I'll say user one, great. I'll just scroll down. It's telling you the name of the user. I'll say the name of the user is also user one. Again, there are multiple fields like what is the first name, what is the last name, and etc. So I'll say this is user, this is one. Again, these are not mandatory fields. Even if you don't fill them up, it will still work. And then it's telling, do you want me to auto generate a password? I'll say I'll just create a new password out here. I'll just create some password, and then it's asking what are the rules and etc. And also what Azure tells you is that you can restrict the user sign in from a particular country. For example, let's say you only want the user to log in from India, not anywhere else. You can say usage location, and you can search for a country like India out here. You can say India, which only allows the users to sign into India from India out here. There are a few companies, because of their tax limitations, because of a lot of things out here, the company won't really allow you to go ahead and sign in from a different country. So this is where you can, let's say, block the user login and all that stuff. But in my case, I'm not blocking the user login. Again, I can, tell multiple things like the user job title. I can say he's a developer. I can say the department is development. I can say the company name is like Tata or something like this. And I can then say create this particular user out here. So as and when I do that, it's now telling that the user is successfully created. User one got successfully created, and I don't still see the user. Just refresh the screen, and now I see something like user one out here. Now, in the past, I've seen students, let's say, struggling with user creation out here. It's because when you create a user, you'll have to give a strong password. If you give a weak password, it will fail to create. So please give us a strong password, mostly with, let's say, having a capital letter, having numbers, having special characters, and etc. Put that password in, and the user should be created out here. So I now have user one created, and if I click on this particular user, this is the first user that I went ahead and create this out. Click on this particular user, and it's telling user principal name is something like user one @some.com, some on Microsoft.com and etc. I'll just copy this out. Okay. Now I am this user. I just joined the company. And the very first thing I get an email telling that this is your ID, this is the password using which you can log into your Azure portal and all that stuff. I'll say great, and I'll go into a different window. Now this is an incognito window, so again if I can click on these three dots, there's something called incognito window out here, which won't track my browsing history and all that stuff. The reason I'm not signing in with the same window is because if I again do portal.azure.com, it will take me to my ID only. There'll be a conflict there. So I'll say new incognito window, and I'll say portal.azure.com. I am the new user who joined in. This is my ID, user one @some on Microsoft.com and so on and so forth. I'll say next, and it's able to identify that yes, I exist in the directory. If I don't exist, it will simply tell that the ID is not existing. I cannot, let's say, help you out. So I'll just go ahead and give a password out here. And this is the password that I received over the email from my administrator, whoever created me. It gave me this particular password. And as and when Azure understands that, okay, fine, this password is something that you did not create, someone else created. So please go ahead, give a new password. Until then, I cannot help you. So I'll just go ahead and give my current password out here and update my password, and I'll say sign in. It'll say help protect your account with multi-factor authentication, where it'll ask you to give your phone number and etc. I'll just skip this for 14 days right now. So I'll just skip this out. I'll say no, and I'll log in here. Again, I have logged in now with a different account called user one @some on Microsoft.com. And this is my administrator account. which is classes Azure DevOps @gmail.com is the account using which I created this particular user. I am logged in. Same time, the user is also logged in. So if this user goes into something called Azure Active Directory, do you see the same directory ID that I am able to see? It's 27D something like this. As an administrator, which is classes Azure DevOps @gmail.com, I'm able to see the same ID, which means both this user and myself, who's an administrator, we both logged into the same, or I wouldn't say subscription, but the same tenant ID out here. Both of them have logged into the same tenant ID out here as such. Now, I added the user here at the tenant ID. Let's come back. I am now logged in like the administrator, which is classes azuredevops@gmail.com. And after this, what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and look into my subscriptions. And I am able to see a subscription called what? Visual Studio Enterprise subscription with the ID with telling what is the status active and all that stuff. I will go into a different browser where I've logged in like this particular user, user1, and I will look into my subscriptions. Same thing. I'm just doing the same operation like this particular user, like the administrator out here. And what does it say? Don't have any subscriptions. Now, why do you all think that this is really happening out here as such? And just allow people to online to kind of talk. Yes. So why do you all think that this is happening out here? Don't have any subscriptions under the user. Okay, I'll take that. Yes, the user might not have any subscriptions under him. Okay. Anything else?
Well, they have their own subscriptions and different.
I'm sorry. I'm not able to hear you if you're talking. The voice is very
For
low.
each and every user, it's a different. For each and every user, we have to create. We have to subscribe, or we have to
Okay.
add new things.
Okay. Okay. For each and every user, we'll have to do a different subscription, or we have to add something like that. Okay. Anything else? Now the concept here is this: the user that I created, which is called user1, is added to my Azure tenant, which means you can just come to the tenant and see what is there in the tenant, meaning in the Active Directory, what is it. That's it. If you add a user to the tenant, it doesn't mean that the user will have access to your subscription. No, you have to also add the user in the subscription, or in order to put it in a different way, you have to give this user a role in your subscription. You have to give a user a role in your subscription out here. Again, the reason this comes into picture is because, see, not everyone in your Azure account needs to be an administrator. If I am the administrator, you are the administrator, you have the same power like I do. You can delete anything, you can do whatever you want to. Azure doesn't, or Azure tells you not to do that. Not to go ahead and do everyone as an, let's say, as an administrator. Administrator should only be few people who can control things out and so on and so forth. That's the reason Azure gives you something called as RBACs. This is what I'm getting into. Called as RBAC. Role based access control. The full form of which is role based access control out here. Again, if I just go into Google and say role based access control Azure, you will be able to directly see the first link on what is role based access control in Azure. When it's tell you access management to the cloud is a critical function for any organization that is using cloud. helps you manage who can access Azure resources, what can do with their resources, what are the areas that they have access to. Meaning, now you are establishing some kind of a control, telling that how can someone access, what area can someone access, what role can someone really have out here. Again, I would suggest you all to read this documentation. Again, I just went into Google. I said role based access control in Azure. I have this particular documentation along with which I have a video and all these things out. So I would say just go through it, understand what exactly the documentation really talks about, because we now have to fall into a habit of reading these documentations, because these documentations change over a period of time. If you see this, the article that was last updated was on, let's say, 28th June, not so long ago, just about 2 months or something like that. So the article keeps changing. They update this out, they delete some contents which are irrelevant and all these things out. So we need to understand how to do it and what to do it and all these things out. So coming back to role based access control. Uh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'll place the URL in the group. Again, I'm not a part of the WhatsApp group that you people are a part of. So what I'll do is that I'll copy this link. I'll paste it in the online session out here. So I will place this in the online session. And once I place it in the online session, I request online guys to please take this link and put it in your WhatsApp group so that everyone can have access to it. Okay. Vasavi, I'll come down to your question just in a minute. I'll just take that. I'll check the chat and take that question. Just give me a minute. I'll just finish this up and come back there. All right. So role-based access control is what I'm trying to discuss out here, or what I'm trying to go into out here. And the role-based access control in Azure tells that there are three broad roles. There are three very broad roles. I'm giving a very broad classification, which is, guys, can you please go on mute if you're not speaking? I'm getting a lot of echo. This is something that I'm again requesting. Okay. So there are three broad roles that you can have access to. One is an owner. Two is a contributor. Role three is a reader. So owner, contributor, and reader. Again, there are a lot of roles, but these are the three broad classifications of what we call in the RBAC out here. So RBAC's owner, contributor, and a reader. Again, owner here is like an administrator. I would say like an admin, like the admin to your account. So I'll just type this in here. It's easier for me to, let's say, manage. Owner is just like an administrator out here, admin for your account. As an owner, I can add users like just the way I did, because I'm the owner out here. I can add users, or I can delete users, or I can modify users. I can go inside a user, I can say the department is not development, the department is something else. I can modify the user out here. I can add resources. When I say resources, these are the actual resources on the Azure portal, like databases, virtual machines, storages, and all these things. I can add resources, modify resources, or delete the resources. Basically, I'm an administrator. I can do anything that I can. I can, let's say, change the billing budgets. I can do a lot of things out here. So I can do anything and everything in the Azure portal if I have the role called as an owner out here. Good enough. Again, if I want to see my role, I'll just go into the subscriptions, and in the subscription, do you see here? It's telling my role is what? Owner. I'm classes azuredevops@gmail.com. I have this role. That's the reason I was able to go ahead and add someone else inside my Azure portal out here, into my Azure tenant out here. Good enough. But I cannot end up giving everyone an owner role. I should not give everyone an owner role, because if I add someone who's a new, very new employee, what if he had someone like his friend or something like that into my Azure subscription? That will be a violation of my confidentiality. A lot of things out here will impact. That's the reason Azure will tell you that, you know what? If you want the user to do good amount of things, but in a very controlled way, go for a role called contributor. Contributor out here. Now, when I say contributor, a contributor can do anything and everything an owner can do. Anything an owner can do, minus user management. Meaning, as a contributor, I cannot go ahead, add, delete, or modify users. I cannot really do this. I cannot really go ahead and do this particular contributing. I mean, if I'm a contributor, I cannot really go ahead and do this, but I can add, delete, modify resources, and I can do all these things that the owner can do apart from going ahead and doing user management. This is what a contributor role does. Finally, I have a reader role, which only gives me a read access to your Azure subscription. Just seeing what is there in your Azure subscription, etc. Read access, nothing else. And then the question here is that then why? What will this really do? Is this role really important? Would you someone in the real time? Would you give someone a reader access? Yes, we would give someone a reader access. Reason being, again, just a very generic example. Tata Motors went ahead, did their, let's say, tenant, their subscriptions and etc. And at the end of a year, any company goes for auditing, wherein they tell that, okay, fine, this is what we spent, this is what we got, and all that stuff. Even spending on Azure is also an expenditure. Tata can say, you know what, I spent like about 1 crore on Azure, but who's going to verify that? There should be someone who's an auditor who's coming in and need to understand whether really they spent so much, what is their billing and all that stuff. For that, I also need to, at a later point in time, add someone like an external auditor into my tenant. If I add an external auditor, I don't have to give him an owner or a contributor. He's not doing anything. He's just coming here, seeing what is there and verifying whether everything is, let's say, right or not. In that cases, I can give someone a reader access just to go ahead and see whether whatever I declared is right. Just giving an example, it can be multiple things out here. It can be external companies who want to see what you're doing and all that stuff. So in that case, you can go ahead and give something known as a reader role out here. So again, okay, I'll just take a pause, just answer a couple of questions and move forward. So first question that I'll take on the chat is that, okay, let me also unmute people online, and guys, please maintain the decorum of the class. Please go on mute if you're not speaking. Do I need to get a free license? Then I need to log into Portal. How is it like? I tried to access Portal. Saying error that have kind of access and then got a free license. Yes, then yes, that's correct. Reason being, right now Azure is not giving up something like a free tenant licenses. Earlier, even without a subscription, you were able to see your tenant ID. Right now, Azure is not giving that tenant ID. Azure is expecting you to create a subscription firstly, and then you'll be able to see the tenant, as I explained yesterday. Please go ahead, create a free subscription out here, and then you'll be able to see the tenant out here. You will need one free subscription to go ahead and start doing this. And as I said, uh, from today you can start creating your subscriptions. Like today is a good day. I mean, today is like, the best day to go ahead and, let's say, start creating your subscriptions. Reason being, we will start our demos. Like we will start our actual demos to go ahead and, let's say, add users, manage users, and all these things. So it's a good time to start creating your subscriptions out here. From today, you'll have 30 days out here. And again, after that, you can create a new subscription or go for a paid subscription and so on and so forth. So yes. Yes, any more questions still here on what are the rules, what is this, and all that stuff? Mhm. Tenant administrator or a user, again, to build a small diagram. So I have a tenant, I created a tenant, then I created a subscription. As and when I created a subscription, I became the owner for this particular subscription because I created it. And under this, I am now going ahead and adding a user out here called user one. I just added this user one onto my tenant. no access, nothing. So if I go back into that particular user one, still the same, not able to see any subscriptions, nothing as such out here. So this is where I am. Yes. Okay. Every user doesn't require a subscription. Every user needs to be added to your subscription. Right now, I just added the user here on the tenant. The user, if you add into the tenant, will have access to the tenant but not the subscription. You will have to go ahead and give him something called as a role assignment onto your subscription. Subscriber has to provide, admin has to provide access to the user. Yes. Yes, admin has to provide the access, and that's what I'm going to do going forward. That's what I'm going to do out there. Yes, any more questions? Anyone, any more questions out here? Admin, you say? You mean administrator? Mhm. When you say subscriber, what exactly do you indicate? Subscription, yes. Yes. No, it is a little different. It's subscription. Subscription is a space that you will get so that you can start using Azure. As an administrator, I will need to add you not only to the tenant, but also give you a role onto my subscription. Only then you can go ahead and start using the same thing out there as such. Yes, you should create the user in the Azure Active Directory. That's the parent. User need not to be a part of subscription. If the user is not a part of subscription, this is what you'll be able to see. There is, you don't have any subscriptions. This is what a user, I'm a user who is a part of the Active Directory. As a user one, I am part of the Active Directory out here. I am a part of the Active Directory. I am the user out here. But I don't have access to any of your subscriptions because you haven't given me any role to your subscription out here yet. So I'll simply be able to see this one. Again, if you just add a user to the tenant and not give him a role onto any of the subscriptions, there is no value addition out there. Because as a user, I want to, let's say, go ahead and perform something in your Azure portal. That's what you hired me for, right? So as a user, if you want someone to, let's say, have access, you have to give access. How do you give access? Is by doing something called as a role based access control, RBAC, or we also call it this as role assignments. RBACs or role assignments and etc. Correct. Mhm. Again, I mean, different teams, you can have different teams inside an organization. Like mhm. Any number of users, yes. A subscription can have, yes, any number of users. Depending upon, yes, the size of the project, or depending upon the size of the organization and all these things. Mhm. Yes, if there are multiple subscriptions under the same thing, that's what I was coming to. Is that again same example? Tata has multiple subscriptions. You added a user one. Probably he's only an employee of Tata Motors, so I'll only add him to one subscription. I won't even add him to subscription 2 or subscription 3. As an administrator, I can now choose which subscription that I need to add you to, whether you're a part of Tata Motors or Tata Finance and all these things. So, yes. What role it is just depends upon what department do you really belong to, what role do you really need. Yes, administration administrator will give that role. Again, if it's a very big company, there can be multiple administrators because one administrator really cannot manage so many users out here. So there can be multiple administrators if it's a very big company out there as such. Not necessarily. The question here is that is the administrator who's created the tenant? Not necessarily. Yes, If you create a tenant, you automatically become the administrator of that particular tenant. But I can also go ahead and add multiple users and give them an administration role later. Mhm. Yes, he can change role. So if you give someone an administrator role, yes, they can go and change the role out there. Yes, definitely. In one Azure tenant, there can be multiple administrators. Yes, there can be definitely. Who will assign the administrator? Again, I at least need to have one administrator to begin with. The main one. That main one can go and add someone. That someone can add go ahead something like that. So I at least need to have one person who is an administrator to start things off. Again, when you start an organization, it's not like I'm adding 10,000 people at a go. No, we'll start slowly and then we'll start adding people out there. So yes, I'll need to start at least with one administrator out there. Here's the icon for administrator. If I just go here, this is my owner or administrator, one and the same out there as such. If there are different administrator, no. If I'm the administrator, I'm logging in, I'm able to see the role called owner out here. If you are the administrator, you will have a different ID. I won't be able to see your ID here. You'll have to log in with your ID out here, called xyz@gmail.com. If you log in, you'll be able to also see that you are an owner out here as such. It will be a specified access. It will tell you a specified access, which we'll see on how do you add a contributor and so. Yes, yes, that's correct. This is only your role. This is your role, meaning you logged in. This is your role. If I log in, if I'm the administrator, even I'll be able to see that I'm the owner in my own account. Definitely, because can you? The point here is that if I create one account called ABC and ask everyone to share the same thing, it will not really make any sense, right? I need to have multiple accounts. I need to have multiple roles at, let's say, multiple subscription levels as such out there. Yes, they are working for the same subscription. So they have multiple Azure accounts under the same tenant, not multiple tenants. What is that account as in? What is that Azure account? This is the Azure account. User at the rate something. Isn't this an Azure account? Hmm. No, it won't create a tenant. Why will it create a tenant? To if I go into Azure Active Directory using this account, what is the tenant that I see? I have not created a tenant. I added a tenant. I am added into a tenant out here. Same tenant ID. If I go back, this is the administrator account. Same tenant ID. So under the same tenant, it's same thing. Under one book, you're adding multiple people, multiple names of people out here. That's it. So same account, same tenant. You can add multiple users as such. Again, in my tenant, there are about four users as of now. If I keep adding multiple, I'll be able to see there are multiple users, and I, as an administrator, will be able to see who are all the users that are added out here as such. Definitely. That's the reason I said that you'll get an email firstly to begin with your login credentials, and that's how we logged in. And then we changed the password, updated, and all these things. No, not really. I'm classes azuredevops@gmail.com. I have a login. Do you agree with the point that this is a different login? This is a different ID. I, as a user, am I using the same ID? I'm a different ID under the same tenant. So yes, different IDs, not the same ID as such out there. Yes, yes, he should not be able to access. As an administrator, yes, I should be able to modify your role. But as an administrator, I should not be able to go into your ID, access your ID. No, it's not that point out there. Right? Yes, any more questions here? Can we set any limit to users to use our credits? No, you cannot do that. Okay, no problem. So got it, no problem. Yes. Yes. Does anyone have any question online? Okay, guys, I cannot keep muting you all if you do not have a question. If you don't have it, please go on mute so that it won't disturb others. All right, so I'm here. This is what I did. Guys, please go on mute if you do not have a question again. Bhargav, do you have a question? Swati, do you have a question?
Kiran, I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
Um, Kiran, I am in a subscription like pay and go in a
Okay.
standard.
Okay.
If I need to add a user
Mm-hmm.
and I need to give access to that user a basic plan,
Okay.
can I able to do it?
No, because plans apply to a subscription out here. Plans are something that applies to a subscription. So if I go to help and support, the one that I was telling yesterday, and I'll say support plans, plan applies to a subscription. And if you add people into your subscription out there, all those who are into your subscription will fall under the same basic plan as such out there. You cannot change it per a user. This is not per a user, this is per a subscription. That's where support plan really comes into picture out here as such.
Okay.
Yes, any more questions? So this is what I did.
Yeah, Kiran.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, actually, I tried to create a user one. So it
Okay.
asked me that is work for a school account or a personal account? It is asking the question by
Sorry.
creating in private
Sorry.
account.
Okay. Can you please come with your question again? If you're creating a user one, so you went into Active
Yeah,
Directory, you
yeah, I
set user.
created done. So after
Okay.
that, I open in a private browser. So in
Okay.
that, I logged in that which I was given the
Okay.
user one mail ID.
Okay.
So after that, next I was entering the password. Before that,
Mm-hmm.
I got a question that it is we are having a trouble location your account. Which type of account do you want to use? So there is two
Uh,
options are there.
okay.
One is work or a school account, or one is a personal account.
Just say personal account, and also please send me the screenshot out here. Just want to see by exactly getting that particular message out there as such.
Yeah, I can do that.
Sure. Yes. Any more questions that I can take, guys? Hmm. Hmm. Okay, we have it in. Okay. Okay. Azure Active Directory. Correct. Hmm. Okay. No. How will I, as a user, create myself? Mhm. Correct. Yes. Yes. Under one tenant, there are three users, you say. Okay. Okay. No, just a second. Again, when you say subscription has created the users, you're confusing yourself right now. Let's see. Subscription is nothing but a ID so that you can start using Azure. Subscription won't create a user. An administrator has to create a user. One who has created the tenant. Yes. Let's go with that, telling that administrator is the one who went ahead and created a tenant ID. Yes. I'm the administrator. I become the administrator. Yes. Again, just a second. When you say tenant ID himself, tenant ID is not a person. Tenant ID is just a space. This is the tenant ID. This, yes, the one who's created, which is classes@gmail.com in our case. Yes. Hmm. Again, coming back, not the same tenant ID. It's the same. Administrator ID. Will he create the same subscriptions? Not essentially. You can add multiple people who have the access to create a subscription. Yes. I can, as an administrator, create multiple subscriptions. I can go ahead and do that, or I can assign someone else to go ahead and do that on my behalf. No, to create the subscription. To answer to your question, you're talking about subscription creation, right? There can be multiple users who can go ahead and create the subscription out there. Mhm. The users are created firstly as a part of tenant, not a subscription. Under a subscription. Correct. Correct. Mhm. Administrator? Yes. Yes. Mhm. Again, why will he access from the administrator account? I mean, that's what I'm trying to tell you is that why will I as a user try to again take the administrator account? Mhm. Yes. IDs are different. Mhm. Okay. They need to log into the same Azure tenant. Why shouldn't they not log into the same Azure tenant out here? That's fine, not a problem. Sorry? They did not log into the subscription yet. I did not add them to the subscription yet right now. I just added them to the tenant. So again, okay, just a second. Just see this. I'm a tenant. I'm an administrator. Agreed. I have the access to add a user. Agreed. I go and add a user. So I'll say users. I'll say new user. I'll say create a user. I'm creating a user right now. So I'm creating you as a user. I'll say your user 2. I go and say your name is user 2 out here. I'll create a password for you. I'll go and add you out. You're a user 2 created successfully. And once I refresh the screen a couple of times, you should be a user 2. You have your own ID called user 2 at the rate something like this. This is your ID. My point is that why will I give this particular user my ID right now? That's exactly my point. I did not tell that on how do I access a subscription. I did not add him to a subscription yet. I'll need to, or you will need to add him to a subscription. But if this user needs to log in, I'm not going to give him an admin credential. I'll just go here. Let's say this is sign in with a different account. I'll say this is user 2 at the rate something that I got. I'll give the password here, which I got over the email that the administrator has set. Since the administrator has set this out, definitely user should have a different access. What if the administrator and everyone has the same access? Then that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? So users should have a different access. So I'll skip this out right now. And once I skip this, I am now logged in as user 2. I'm now a user 2 out here who doesn't have access to the subscriptions. I still do not go and give the access to the subscription yet. If I need to give the user 2 an access to the subscription, I again need to come back as the account owner. Reason being the user cannot add himself into a subscription. He doesn't have any access out there. So if he doesn't have any access, I cannot add the users. So if I come under the subscription, yes, if I come under the subscription as the administrator, if I click on this particular subscription, there is something called IAM, access control, or identity and access management. So if I click on this one, I'll say add, I'll say a role assignment. That's what I was telling, RBAC role assignment out here, under which owner, contributor, reader, and a bunch of a lot of things out here. I'll say contributor. I'll say next. Again, I'll recap this out, but just to give you a very high level, I'm just going through this one. I'll say members. I'll say select members, and I'll say user 2. This is a user 2 who's added into my tenant but has no access onto my subscription. I'll say select. I'll say review and assign. So I'm adding user 2 onto my subscription right now. User 2 is added now as a contributor onto that particular subscription called Visual Studio Enterprise subscription by the administrator right now. So now as a user, if I just refresh the screen out here, it will take at least 5 to 6 minutes of time for this user to, let's say, realize that he has a subscription. So if I do a couple of refreshes out here, I now see a subscription under what? User 2, sharing the same credits that I do have, specified access. This is what it will now tell for a user out here as such. Again, I went here into my subscription as the administrator, clicked on identity and access management, said add, said role assignment, selected a role called owner, contributor, or reader. I said contributor, said next, selected a member, and selected the member like user 2, user 1, whatever it is. And then I went ahead and added this particular, say for example, I selected this user 1. I'll say next, and I'll say review and assign this out. So not only adding user at this role, at this level you're adding it, but at a subscription you're giving the user a role so that the user can go ahead and start accessing your subscription here. It depends upon the administrator. No, it depends upon the organization. The organization, the policies of the organization. Then you will be able to, let's say, yes, administrator has to assign it. Yes, it completely depends upon the organization and also the administrators in the organization to go ahead and add that particular user out there as such. Okay, in an organization there are multiple tenants. No, there are multiple subscriptions. Once multiple subscriptions out here under the same tenant. Yes. Not really. I mean, it just depends upon again the company out here or the complexity in the company out here. Companies can also go for multiple tenants as such out there as such. Yes. Any more questions? Okay. Let's see. I have a multiple questions out here that I can take. Okay. When do we need to, let's say, take a subscription to start practicing? I would say today. How to create a tenant ID? Just go into portal.azure.com, log into portal.azure.com, and the tenant ID will be created for you directly. For subscription we can go to subscription, then we can add yes, but before that, to create a tenant ID, no, you firstly go ahead log into Azure, and as and when you log into Azure you create a tenant ID for yourself, but you probably might not be able to see the tenant ID until you add a subscription under it. Okay, will be the user under reader role if subscription is not assigned? No, the user will not even be under the reader role. He cannot even read what is there in the subscription if the role assignment is not there. So the role assignment will decide what role a user will actually get, whether it's a reader, whether it's a contributor, or an owner out here as such. Okay, so I'm a little top of the hour right now, so I have another class to attend. So whatever questions you will have, please park it, and tomorrow we'll start with a question and answer session, and then we'll move forward with the role assignments out here. Yes, different roles of users. Yes, yes, we are going to see what are the different roles. Yes, practically yes. Again, right now I'm just touching the basics to understand the nomenclature and to touch upon all these things out. But once we go and start with the resources, that's when the role assignment will actually make a lot of sense. Yes. Without giving the subscription, can we give the role? Not really. You have to have a subscription to give a role out here. Okay. Or even for read access, yes. Okay. Thank you guys, and I'll take more questions tomorrow, and we'll get started from. Thank you.